Oh, by the way, our neighbor is having air conditioning duct work done. Do you hear that whining noise?
No.
Oh, so he's cutting like pipes up there on the roof, and there's this noise, and then it stops because it doesn't take very long
Should
to
go
cut
outside and yell at
pipes.
him. We're doing a podcast episode. If you could just keep it down.
I actually thought about that.
Hi, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm better than I was. I'm sucking on a cough drop right now, and I
Oh,
still have some crud.
yeah. That's annoying.
It feels like it's sucking all the moisture out of my mouth too. But anyway, I'm hoping that it will keep me so I don't have to keep on doing that. But clearly, it's not working. Anyway, how are you doing?
That's okay. Good. Uh, yeah, just chilling.
Got rid of that
Works.
second stripe,
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't know. I used up the 2 tests I had, so, but I've just been going out like normal. So,
as if you're
um,
negative. You've been willing yourself into negativity.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
so
Got COVID, by
everybody,
the way.
welcome. Yes, that's what we're alluding to. Eric got sick over the holidays. He broke his long streak of not getting COVID, and now I
Yeah.
remain as the our only family member who has not tested positive for COVID. Welcome everybody to episode 11 of the Mom and Eric podcast. I hope you enjoyed your break from us and your celebratory times with your family and whoever you celebrated with over the holidays. But anyway, we had a great break, didn't we, Eric? We did have a great break,
It was okay.
right? Yeah.
It was good. It was, no, I had fun. It was great.
Today's episode focuses on the Holdovers, which just received some Oscar nominations, which we should talk about towards the end of the episode. But I do want to talk a little bit about how difficult it was to freaking watch, to find a movie to watch.
Yeah.
So we wanted, I think we were both leaning towards watching a movie with currency. And there were quite a few movies, not that Oscars are the only currency, but there were quite a few movies, independent films and big name films that were jostling for attention because there were lots of campaigns going on, particularly for the Academy Awards. So there was lots of efforts to do for your consideration type of advertising. All the stars were kind of doing PR and marketing. Now that the strike was over, everybody was really trying to get their horse into the race. And as a result, I went through, at least, I don't know how frustrating you found it, but I think last year I thought that you had so much access to movies because you had this all access pass through AMC and you were going to see like 2 or 3 movies a week. But then when it came time to actually deciding on a movie to watch for this episode, I was being driven crazy by how they were appearing and disappearing from theaters and from the streaming platforms. And so I actually think that everybody was trying to make money. I think that everybody was just trying to make money some way or another. And I actually don't pretend to understand how the movie distribution system works. Like I get that. I get that something happens at all the film festivals where you get your film accepted for a festival and then you shop it around to different buyers. But I don't know whether or not the buyers are the ones who then like take care of all the which theater chains show it, where does it get shown, blah, blah, blah. That is, by the way, why Taylor Swift made such a big noise when she released her concert film, because she just cut out all the studios. She didn't produce it. So she went with an independent producer, I think, and then, and I actually think she's up for awards because of that. And she's listed as a producer, and then she went directly to AMC for an exclusive deal to distribute this. And meanwhile, all of the studios are like, "Wait, what? How can she do this? Like what's going on?" So I guess we're in a time right now where there's so much disruption going on in the film industry and how movies are seen. But as the end user, as the viewer of films, it was driving me crazy. Like I kept on looking at Fandango to see if there was a movie time. We were originally going to go see Poor Things. because you had seen that when you got back to school. So I kept on checking movie times. I kept on checking Amazon Prime rentals. The Holdovers was available for rent for a while, but then it disappeared. Then it was only available to buy, and I was like, do I really want to own that movie? Like, why would I
Yeah.
want to own that movie? Like, even though I was willing to pay $19 to rent it, I just didn't think that it was a movie that I own, and I don't know why I felt that way. I might feel that way differently anyway. But and then Poor Things was available for a tiny period of time, I think on Hulu, and then it went back to the theaters, and so everything was just fucking driving me crazy in terms of actually being able to see the film. But
It's
anyway,
nothing really that new, though. I mean, because we tried to watch the Holdovers like way after it already come out, and usually there's a period when it leaves the theaters that it's not available anywhere until a few months after, when it's on DVD and then streaming. I think because a lot of movies are getting released on streaming, we're just having an expectation that like it'll always be available. But Everything Everywhere wasn't available for so long, but that's on Netflix now. So like.
yeah.
And because that was like an
I just
exclusive
felt like I was
release.
chasing it though.
Yeah,
I felt
and
like I
I'm
was
lucky.
chasing it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it, and I'm lucky now because I live like in Orange, and that's like AMC Orange. I learned is like the most popular theater in the country. I think it's like the most like it has the most attendance out of any theater anywhere. So
Yeah.
like all movies will be playing there, so I sort of have like
Yeah.
like the advantage of like, oh, Poor Things, yeah, let's just go see that. Or they're always playing random indie movies and stuff. Like I saw Shortcomings, I don't think that was showing a lot of places.
Yeah.
So that's my advantage. But we did get to see this movie, which is great, and I did appreciate that we could see it on streaming. So.
Yeah. For our audience, by the way, I ended up buying the film on Amazon. We now own it, and so Eric was able to just access it through our library. So, and then actually, in retrospect, now since both of us have watched it, and it was $20 to buy it, we basically paid what we would have paid to see it in a theater. And I
That's
actually
true.
think it's one of those movies that's fine on a small screen. It's fine on a small
Yeah.
screen. I don't think that it's one of those movies that's must see. Like I don't think that I can see the Dune sequel on the small screen. I think I'm going to buy obviously IMAX tickets for that.
It does fit like the home video aesthetic of like
Yes.
or it fits the vibe of like renting a movie from like Blockbuster.
Yes. So The Holdovers is a movie that's directed by Alexander Payne. Alexander Payne is a very well-known director. He really came to fame with his big breakout film was Election, which I haven't seen and which I really very much wanted to see before seeing The Holdovers. But I think that Alexander Payne is more famous for Sideways. So he's just really well known for what I would call these human dramas that are not, they're not earth-shattering things that happen. They're not like huge events, but they're really character dramas. That is probably how I would characterize almost all of his films. And then the other thing I would say is I realized, in doing a little research on Alexander Payne, that I really kept on mixing him up with Noah Baumbach because both of them got famous around the same time.
That is a weird mix-up.
I know, like Noah Baumbach. Well, they kind of look alike. I mean, Alexander Payne has entirely gray hair, but other than that, they're sort of spiky featured. Like they have like puppy dog eyes. And I think that Alexander Payne is much older. But then I literally was trying to keep them separate based on on all the gossip about them. So Noah Baumbach is obviously he's the partner of Greta Gerwig. He cheated on his wife, who's Jennifer Jason Leigh, a very well-known actress, with Greta Gerwig, and they just got married. I think Noah Baumbach is given actually like a co-writing credit on Barbie. I have a more negative feeling about Noah Baumbach because I have a more negative feeling about Greta Gerwig. I'm not one of the people who's sitting. I mean, I understand that I'm being a bad feminist right now, but I'm not weeping that Greta Gerwig did not get a Best Directing nomination for Barbie. Just not super bummed.
Everybody knows.
I'm
Everybody
actually,
knows you weren't a big fan.
Yeah, but actually, I'm more bummed that Margot Robbie did not get an acting nod because I actually think that's a really hard part to play, and I think she played it really, really well.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I kept on getting Noah Baumbach and Alexander Payne confused. Alexander Payne actually was married to Sandra Oh, who's one of my favorite actresses. She's Korean. Even though there's no reason why one should compare them, I actually thought, for some reason, I just had this opinion in my head that I think that Alexander Payne is the better filmmaker than Noah Baumbach. And I think it's because of how both of them make what I would call character driven dramas, very like small scale character driven dramas. But at the same time, I think that Noah Baumbach has a really sour, jaundiced view of humanity. And I think that despite the fact that Alexander Payne makes movies about characters who are kind of messed up, kind of hurting, kind of in pain in a lot of ways, I think that his viewpoint as a director and a filmmaker, I think he is very loving towards humanity. I think that he makes you want to root for human beings. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? Like he makes you want to root for the characters. So with that segue, let's talk about let's talk about the Holdovers. So first of all, quickly on the plot, it's about a teacher left to babysit students over the holidays at this really fancy boarding school. And he and the student and one of the kitchen staff people who's also on site end up spending a lot of time together over the holidays. So that's the premise of the movie. And so let's start with you. What'd you think?
I really liked it. It was just a nice experience. I think I had the same reaction to Sideways. I think both of those films are just good, solid movies, and like you said, they're very character driven. The characters in both of those movies are just such like they're just such real people. They're not in service of anything but what is their characters basically, which is very refreshing, I think. Because it's almost unbelievable how fully realized like the worlds are in terms of it's just like real life.
Yes.
But yeah, I really liked it. I will say I think it sort of like met my expectations exactly. I think I was expecting it to be just a good movie, and it was a good movie. I do always hope that it sort of exceeds my expectations, but you know, it just kind of it was good. And I think the reason I feel that is
you sound just like Dad, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I watch it with Dad. And I said, "What'd you think?" And he goes, "It was good."
Yeah.
He sounds just like her.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, I think a big reason I feel that way is because I think I was in the beginning of the film, I was definitely expecting it to go a certain way. I think they set up a bunch of characters. They set up all the other kids that were there, with the main kid, Tully, and I expected them to be together the whole movie. But then the other kids sort of just noped out like halfway through the movie, and then it was Paul Giamatti's character and Tully, and I think it was beautiful, definitely. And I think I was still very invested in the rest of the movie. But I guess a part of me wished that, you know, everybody's characters were resolved and everybody got like a little, you know, nice little wrapped bow at the end. But I think it doesn't, I didn't feel it overstayed its welcome, even though it was over 2 hours. I think it just was perfectly, you know, how it was. So just perfectly solid.
Yeah.
What'd you think?
Yeah. I don't think that Alexander Payne, by the way, wraps anything up in a bow.
Yeah, no.
I think that all of his movies, at least the ones that I've seen, you know, his movies are all about ordinary people who have a less than ordinary period of their lives where they realize something a little bit more profound or deep about themselves, or it's a transition period. Mm-hmm. But by the end, you don't have this feeling like, oh, they're all going to ride off in the sunset and they're all going to be great. It's more that they are It's more that they're changed by what they went through. So I too went into the movie expecting to like it, and I ended up kind of loving it, actually.
Great.
I loved it.
Rare.
And, I know it's rare. I don't know. I don't know if I loved Sideways when I saw it, but I loved this one, and I just had a I just I was liking it more and more as I was watching it. I liked it from the get-go. I loved how the credits made me feel like there's that it was going to be so vintage, like it was really going to be put me back into that time and that place.
Hmm.
So I was kind of tickled by the whole, color saturation. I think they even gave a credit at the outset of the color technology that they used.
Right.
So they had like a whole thing about this color was done through blah 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 studio, and I was like, wow, that's pretty hardcore.
Hmm.
So I ended up loving it so much because I don't think that the movie put a foot wrong. Like I don't think that there were any false notes
Hmm.
or jarring notes or things that just felt wrong. And when I was trying to give an example of what I meant by that, like jarring notes or things that felt like discordant, I was thinking of what our conversation, which we had about Spielberg, where he always just tries to go too far and tries to manipulate people's emotions with those gestures. And then the other glaring example, a recent example of a discordant note is Oppenheimer, which, is expected to win big at the awards. I did not think that Florence Pugh needed to be naked in the way that she was during her scenes. Like I just felt like there were ways to make the point of her character and what she was in Oppenheimer's life without having her do two nude scenes, one the actual sex scene and then one the scene in the question in the interrogation room. And so both of those times, like they were done, it just felt schlocky and gimmicky and as if they were done for shock value. And in the Holdovers, I never had that feeling like anything was a false note or anything was out of whack. Do you know what I mean? Like there was nothing shocking or jarring. It was just these three characters interacting and sharing, and you got more and more a sense of who they were. And then really quickly I was rooting for them. Like I was rooting for all of them. I was rooting for them in a very ordinary human way. Like these are people who've been through some really terrible things, and I want them to survive. I don't expect them to be happy. I just want them to survive.
Yeah.
So that's but in thinking about it, Eric, I just haven't lost that feeling of loving the movie. I'm not sure I would give it 5 stars, but I just think it's so hard to balance all the different elements of sentiment, and tragedy and humor. I think I think that's an underestimated value in filmmaking, where you like tell these human dramas, but you don't let the story run away from you. You don't have these shock jarring notes. Instead, you knit this perfect like story together, and you keep on striking the right notes again and again and again. And I think that that's really hard to do, and I think that that's a combination of all the things that we talk about when we talk about filmmaking. I think it's a combination. It was a very good screenplay. The performances were outstanding. The production values were amazing. The music was great.
Yeah.
And like everything and everything just came together, so that it didn't feel nothing felt weird or out of place. And by the end of it, I was really, really invested in their stories and in everything
Yeah.
about them, in those characters' lives.
Yeah.
So I'll stop there and then let you react. But I have one more thing to say about what I love about the movie.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think that it encapsulates like a perfect, solid movie experience. I do like if I am gonna personally resonate with the film to the maximum extent, I guess I just like a bit more embellishment in terms of like filmmaking, like in terms of maybe it doesn't have to be super accurate to the character, but it is super necessary for the movie. And I guess what I mean I think there were a couple moments in the movie where I wanted things to happen, but didn't. Like, or if they explicitly said something that I think didn't need to be explicitly said, or could have just been shown. Like, there was a couple times where when Tully goes to try and see his father, and you know, Paul stops him at the taxi, and he's like, and then he tells him like, I wanted to just see my father, and he's like, you could have just told me that. Like, we could have, well, we could have gone to a cemetery, like, because he had already said his dad died, but then they went to, you know, like a mental facility, like
Institution, yeah.
yeah, they could have. He didn't. He could have just. I feel like Tully could have just said like, I just wanted to see my father, and then it could have maybe ended there. Like, and then, you know, we could have seen that, oh, like he wants to see his dad at the cemetery. Like, we understood that, but then we could have been subverted like with the next scene anyways. But they added that extra line, and maybe it made sense for Paul to say that like explicitly, but it felt like it wasn't really needed for the movie. So it's stuff like that. And then another thing,
I thought it was needed, but I can explain why.
yeah, I get
I
that.
thought it was. I thought that extra line was needed, and it relates to the last thing that I really loved about the movie.
Right. No, I mean that, and I totally understand that. And it's just like a personal thing, I guess. Like another thing, like when he was trying to find Tully, when he wanted to show him that he got like the Christmas tree and the presents and stuff, and he found him like playing piano in the auditorium, and like I was totally expecting a scene where like he comes in and he just like realizes that, oh, this kid can play piano, like let me just sit and listen to him like play the piano. But because it's sort of, maybe that's not his character, he just like waltzes in, like this door slams like really loudly, and just like abruptly this piano stops, and then he's like, what are you doing? Come on, wait, what you stupid, like, come on, I have something to show you. I got to show you this thing I did for you. Like, and obviously I knew watching that, like that made sense for the character. But
Eric, that think if you play that out, you know, where he sits and he listens to the piano, then the piano, let's just say the piano is like really beautiful, and like Paul Giamatti's character is just sitting there going, "Oh my God, this is so beautiful."
yeah,
Then it turns into like much more sentimental schlocky
yeah,
stuff, you know. So you just get the merest glimpses of why Tully is. I mean, number one, there's the principle that any human being is worth, you know, worth caring about. And so you get the sense like he was the only one who got a B plus, for example. So you just get this brief glimpse that he's the only one who's like actually like really a good student, you know, out of all of Tully's students. And then the second thing that you get a glimpse of is you get a glimpse that he needs to express himself in his shitty life, you know, with his shitty parents.
yeah,
He needs to express himself, and so if it had drawn out to this whole piano thing, then it would have been too sentimental.
yeah,
You know what I
that
mean?
makes
Like it
sense.
would have been too easy, you know. But instead, you just get these glimpses, just the same way that now I'm trying to remember Paul Giamatti's character's name. Do you
I think
remember
it's
his name?
Paul.
Character's name?
I think it's,
It's Paul. Yes,
yeah,
it's Paul something. Yeah, but so you get the sense that he too gets these glimpses. He's so embittered and so locked into his life, but every once in a while he gets these, like he reads Tully's exam and he's like, wait a second, this is actually worth a B plus, you know. And then he hears him playing the piano, but he's completely consumed by the desire to show him the Christmas tree,
yeah,
you know. And so the other thing that so I will talk a little bit about why that extra line in the taxi cab made sense to me, and why I think I love this movie is because I think this movie said something about bigger themes without being didactic or obvious about it. And so I really felt that a lot of the movie was about privilege. You know, it was about privilege, and it was about, you know, there's so much reference to these spoiled little shitheads who go to this school. There's so much said about how they're going to go on to like a Yale, Harvard type of school without having to work for it, you know. And so Tully's only job is to just, I mean, the teacher's only job, Paul's only job is to just continue like giving these students good enough grades, you know, so that the senator's son will go on and, you know, continue funding libraries. So it makes all these points about privilege. And then the other thing that is really heartbreaking, a statement about privilege, is what happened to Mary's son, Curtis. You know, he was not granted a draft exemption, and because she couldn't afford college, you know, so she couldn't send him to college. Then he was not granted a draft exemption, and he was killed in the Vietnam War, you know. And she's angry about it. She's angry about it, but she's not a caricature about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's not a caricature in her anger. And you know, my favorite critic, Sarah, pointed out that there's no point at which the movie gives in to having Mary be angry at Tully as this representation of privilege, because she recognizes that he still suffers, like he still has shit going on, and he's not the whole system that caused her son to not be able to go to college and to get killed in the Vietnam War. And so I think that the movie is so subtle in how it evokes those themes. So Tully, Paul saying to Tully, "You could have just told me that your dad, that you were going to see your dad." That's a reference, really, and this is also where Tully's parents come in. It's a reference to how insanely shameful and how much stigma was attached to mental illness. You know, like nobody could talk about it. Nobody could talk about it. 'Cause back then, everybody, like, you were crazy and you had to be locked away. And his mom didn't want anything to do with it. And even though his mom and his stepfather come off as these horrible human beings, they still, you understood a little bit that his mom just didn't know how to deal with it. She just needed to lock him away and never think about it again. So Tully not being able to tell anybody what happened to his dad, this is like his father. He loved him so much before he had his psychotic break, but he can't admit to anybody that his father's locked up in an institution.
Yeah.
You know, he had to tell everybody that he was dead, you know? And so that Paul saying to him, "You could have just told me," is saying, "I'm going to let you in, but you're going to see why it was so hard for me to tell you, you know, why it was so hard for me to admit the truth." And that still makes my throat choke up. That whole scene and sequence, and the fact that Paul waited outside while he talked to his dad, you know, like he went with him, but he just waited outside. So anyway, that to me is the you know, the big reason why I love The Holdovers, is because even though it's primarily a character drama, you definitely got the sense that it was about bigger things, even though the lens was always focused on these characters and what was happening between them. So nothing was heavy-handed. This was not like, we're going to give you a lesson about privilege and mental health and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the interesting ways that they subverted that notion of privilege, I think one of the funniest ways they subverted that notion of privilege, was not just in the fact that Mary was so kind and so caring to Tully, but it was also that really funny dude who took them all on the ski vacation. Like, he's just a super nice, chill guy. And he was like, "Yeah, everybody come along. You know, everybody just, I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to rescue you, you know?" And so he could have been like the biggest dick in the world, you know, but he was just like, "Yeah, no, whatever. Let's just go skiing."
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting way to me about subverting privilege.
That was really eloquent way of describing why it was necessary, because it was also made for that time period, like the 70s. And it was filmed like it was, or it was edited mainly like it was from the time period. I think that all makes perfect sense. I guess what I touch on is just the fact that I want to be selfish and like want my own kind of movie how I want it. And and I think that's totally fine, because I'm so and you know, it's not, this happens a lot now, because it's like I always am looking for, like, you know, the best movie. But I'm very ready to accept what this movie does right, and all of what you said I think is true. And another thing, this is a separate sort of note, but on that topic of like it's for the time period, like I do want to mention that the editing was really great.
Yeah,
because
it was good.
You know, in my review, I said a cheeky mention of like, we need to bring back cross dissolves. You know what cross dissolves are? It's basically just like fades, like fade transitions in movies. Like,
yeah.
Older movies definitely did that a lot more, where they would, you know, fade into different shots. And in the beginning of this movie, there was a lot of that. But just the fact that like we can kind of just glide our way through this sort of space and exist with the characters is was something I really appreciated. And I was just noticing like how much time was given to each scene, and a lot of the comedy I think had to do with like what reactions we saw, and Paul Giamatti just is such a he's not only a great like character actor, but like his facial expressions are really amazing. Yeah, just the casting was amazing. But yeah.
They're so good. Yeah, they're so good. Dominic Sessa was apparently found after a giant search. I think they looked
The
at
kid?
800 actors. Yeah, the kid, Dominic Sessa, Tully, and I think that he got the part finally because he got the part finally because they had him read with Paul Giamatti, and it was a chemistry. Like it was the chemistry between the two of them. On this, returning to that point that I was making about the larger themes, when I was thinking about these themes of privilege and about inequality, and how do you like just exist, and continue to exist and not be this horrible, bitter human being? Like Mary embodied this woman who's just had so many hard knocks. Like her husband died, and then her husband died, and then her son dies, in the Vietnam War, and it's all because of unfairness and inequality. But she does not come off as a bitter human being like a character.
Yeah.
She comes off as a grieving person, but she still retains her humanity about how to be a good person, even though she's grieving, she's so grief stricken. And I just thought that thing about her, putting her hopes and dreams into her sister's baby was just such a beautiful point.
Oh God. Yeah,
But the thing about
yeah. She seems so strong like the first half of the movie, or like she seemed like,
yeah,
I'm like, wow, she seems all right. Like she's talking about it so like effortlessly, even though it's so horrible, and all these other people are consoling her, and you can feel like how much pressure that is. But then obviously she broke because she went to the party and got drunk, and then it just all came crashing down. But then right after that is when they could go to Boston, and then she could see her family, and that's all she needed, was to just be reminded that she still has loved ones in her life, and she can still move on peacefully, knowing that she has people that she can rely on. It was such a beautiful transition.
Yes, and the transition that you just talked about was made even more beautiful by the fact that she made Christmas dinner right after that party and that breakdown. And Tully says to her, this is the first time that we've ever sat down as a family. And I've never had this like family style meal, which was also heartbreaking to hear. And then, she, I think in that moment, realizes that she can still make a difference in the tiniest of ways just by cooking that meal and having them all sit down together. Like it was more of a gesture, even though Paul Giamatti's gesture of buying the Christmas tree was equally as well intentioned. It was poorly executed.
So bad.
So
Dude, the fact that he had so many copies of Meditations, like this book, that I actually kind of want to read just to see if it's like the most boring shit ever. But so funny. Yeah, that was really funny.
Yes, and the first shot of the Christmas tree when it's leaning and it's totally there, and he's got these brown paper packages underneath.
You said it was nice.
Anyway, Mary realizes that she can make a difference, and then that's a transition to her actually, being open to letting her family help her grieve. But anyway, this thing about the larger themes really made me think about the difference between a movie like this and a movie like Past Lives. And I want to talk a little bit about that shorthand phrase that shorthand phrase that you and I use, which is paint dry. Like sometimes watching these little human indie dramas, like character dramas, we sort of feel like it's going like something off is about the pacing, or nothing happens, and you just feel like you're watching paint dry, And so I think that, by the way, like Annie really loved Past Lives and did not she liked the Holdovers very much, but not as much as Past Lives. So Past Lives really spoke to her. But I think that Past Lives suffered from the fact that it wasn't about anything other than what it was about. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't about, the only thing it was about these childhood friends reconnecting. That's it. And this idea, I forget what the Korean word is for it, but this idea that, you stay connected somehow, like you maintain this connection, or you forge these profound connections. I'm not sure that Past Lives was about anything other than that.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really know that much about the characters other than, she moved to the United States. You get glimpses of that he's a student and that now he's working, but there's nothing about the character. So really, like, the Past Lives really truly is the embodiment of a paint drying movie, whereas the Holdovers to me is not a paint drying movie, even though it's very much like a character drama and it's small scale and it's intimate. I actually think that to me, it feels a little bit more weighty and a little bit more meaningful than Past Lives.
Yeah, I think
What do you think
the music definitely, I think the music maybe had a part in that, because
Yes.
they used just a lot of very grounded songs. Like, I recognize
Yes.
The Wind. I didn't recognize anything else, but like it had that same tone of just guitar and very light melodies, and that alone was getting me to tear up. Like, I think in the beginning I looked up
Yes.
Silver Joy. That was just such a beautiful like entrance when he's just walking up to the school.
Yeah.
It was filled with moments like that felt really just like, it felt like that's how you want to feel when you're kind of going through the, like, it just felt more grounded. So I think in Past Lives, it was more just like a way more in like just existing, like it's just the two people, and it's
Yes.
like not as it's not like as shared. It's just them. It's like literally just them, literally just them, and then the husband, because that was so specific. And it's weird because
But the Holdovers doesn't have that many characters either. It just does a better job with its three characters than Past Lives did
Yeah.
with its two main characters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They are, and I think it has to do with the opacity of the characters and how well you get a glimpse into really who they are.
Yeah.
And that comes down to both performances and it comes down to writing,
Yeah.
I think, as well.
And that
So.
I do kind of hate that I'm mentioning that, or the music thing, because the music was the only part at the end of Past Lives that really got me, was when the score was swelling and she was leaving and he had just left.
Yes.
Like, that was the only part that really stuck with me for that movie.
Same.
And I think that's so interesting that I don't know, maybe I think it just took like the whole movie for me to feel for that moment, whereas the Holdovers had a bunch of different moments that made me connect on a bunch of different levels. So
Yes, that's exactly how
and I think
that's
yeah,
connect on a whole bunch of different levels.
yeah, and I
Yes.
guess that experience can just differ from person to person in terms of how it resonates.
So let's talk about production design for the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because it signaled from the very first moment the trailer came out that it was going to be
Period.
like, it was going to take a big swing at being period. Although I think that there's an interview somewhere where Alexander Payne argues that it's not a period film. So I don't know how he would argue that it's not a period film, because it's very much a period film to me. I should go look up that interview and to see what he said about this. But I think that the production design was pretty amazing. Apparently, the school that they shot in was an abandoned building. So I actually I don't know if you know this, but there was one summer. It was a summer after my sophomore year in high school, where Grandma and Grandpa were super into academic enrichment. So they insisted that I go to this summer program at Phillips Andover Academy. And Phillips Academy has two. Number one, Phillips Academy is known as it's the epitome of what the type of school that Barton is. It was a feeder. It all sorts of white men went there and went from Andover. There's two of them, Phillips Academy, one at Andover and one at Exeter. And there's one, and they all go to Harvard and Yale and Princeton from going to a school like that. So I went to a summer enrichment program. I think it's up in New Hampshire or somewhere like way up in New England, like Barton was set in. And I do remember one thing that I think was absolutely faithfully captured in Barton, which is I was thinking that this place, when I was at Andover, it just felt so old. You know what I mean? Like the wood was really dark. You know, the linoleum was really old. Everything smelled old. The wood was really chipped. So I think that you were supposed to be impressed by the architecture. You know what I mean? Like this stately, grand architecture. But instead, I was kind of thinking, oh, this place is kind of a dump.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's massive and classical looking, but it's also kind of a dump. Very sort of New Englandy, like privileged dump. So, like the dorm rooms were ginormous, you know, like huge, you know, just like it's just like the classrooms, you know, in Barton. And so I think that they got the feel of that school and the grounds like perfectly. You know, obviously they deliberately shot in a time when it was icy, wintry. Like you really got that sense of how cold it was. And how miserable New England is in the wintertime. I loved the clothes. I loved the costumes. Like I just thought that they were incredibly well done. Particularly, I loved her purple bathrobe that she wore when she was watching TV with the flowers on it. Like, and there was that point where they were all, when all the students who were going to stay over the holidays were sitting in a room while he was explaining what would happen. Paul Giamatti's character was explaining what would happen over the holidays. So they were all sitting on this sofa that looked like it was made out of corduroy.
Yeah.
And Grandma and Grandpa had that exact same sofa.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, that brown like corduroy sofa, it has like recliners that pop out.
Yeah.
And I took it to New York with me and used them for a few years before I finally got rid of them.
Mm-hmm.
Those sofas are hilarious, by the way. They're hilarious because people would just sit down in them and they didn't know that they reclined. So like they'd be talking, and then right in the middle, boom, the recliner would shoot out.
Yeah.
So I love the production design, right down to the color saturation. I love the Technicolor look, which actually I thought faded. Like I thought that it started off in this really sort of Technicolor, color saturated way. And by the end of the movie, I didn't notice it as much. Did you notice that by any chance?
I think there were certain things that the beginning of the movie established that weren't really carried through the whole movie. Like,
True. Interesting.
Because I think like one thing they did was the titles. They would say December or whatever day 1, and then they said day 4, and I was like, okay, they're just gonna follow this timeline. But you know, when Christmas Eve and Christmas came around, like the titles went away. It only came back for like maybe one of the days before New Year's.
Yeah.
So stuff like that.
I wonder if that was intentional.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, I think I feel like they came in maybe for when you just had to like remind yourself of like where we were, and it wasn't as obvious like what time, like, because you know the holidays, you know when it's the holiday. But I don't know. I mean, I guess like I think at that point too, we were just invested enough with the characters that we didn't really need a lot of that stuff. But I did think that some of the stuff went away. But about the Technicolor look, I guess like that, yeah, it wasn't as noticeable. But maybe just because I wasn't being introduced to it, like. I had already kind of just absorbed myself. Then maybe that's some of the reason why he doesn't think it's a period. I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, it might have been intentional that he started off signaling that it was going to be set in this time, and then he just wanted to focus on the story, so he changed how it was shot. But to me, back in the day when I was watching movies and TV as a kid, the big difference that you could always notice in production was the difference between film and the difference between video, you know?
Right.
And so film had this like gorgeous soft color look, you know, everything looked very like sort of painterly and soft and just gorgeous, you know? And then video, on the other hand, looked really bright and sharp and crystal clear. And so oftentimes it would signal the genre that it was in. So like usually like, for example, comedies, sitcoms were shot in video, whereas movies were shot in film, and then some sitcoms like Cheers, for example. I think Cheers did this. I think Cheers shot in film. So when a comedy or a TV drama shot in film, you immediately notice the difference between it was grainier and softer and much, much more colorful. And then film looked much more harsh, like everybody was a little bit under fluorescent lights, and then everything was really sharp. So I thought that he was going for that sort of old cinematic quality. And I guess everything going digital changed it all. Do you know what I mean? Like everything going digital, you stop noticing the difference between videos and film. But anyway, I thought that this film was going to start like in the way that it began with the credits and the Technicolor look, this color saturation. But then midway through, I noticed that it was not doing that anymore. Like it just wasn't doing that anymore. And actually, like it wasn't that it wasn't colorful anymore, because all of the characters were wearing costumes that very much signaled, they were very colorful. Like he would be wearing like a deep burgundy sweater. Or she'd be wearing that purple dressing gown, or that really nice secretary from the school who had the Christmas Eve party. She was wearing that like marigold yellow turtleneck.
Yeah.
So I thought that the costume design was sort of taking over. But in the beginning, I actually thought that the film itself was going to signal the production values. And then last but not least, it was driving me crazy that I could not tell which eye of his was wandering. And I was so noticing it. I was so noticing that it kept on switching eyes. I was sitting there saying to myself, it's the left one, it's the right one. Yeah. No, it's the left one, it's the right one.
It would switch.
It would switch.
And one of my friends commented, like, was that a prosthetic, or did he just act that? So that was a funny comment. It looks so real. I asked Dad if he noticed it.
Dad said he did not notice it. And then I looked up, of course, on the internet, because I just wanted to know, like, what the hell was going on with his eye. Yeah. And then I had to actually, like, watch all these videos of Paul Giamatti to reassure myself that his eyes are perfectly normal. And then when they actually asked him, how did you get your eye done? Like, how did you do it? And he goes, movie magic. Like, he refused to tell what went into the movie. He goes,
they definitely magic. Switched it up. Oh, my God. It was so
he
annoying.
Definitely switched it up.
Yes, I was trying to see... I was trying to see if they if they were like flipping the screen also instead, or like,
yes,
that was another thing
I was so confused by this
to watch for.
What was so funny though is that it actually became like a plot point.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, because he asked and he said, we don't know which eye to focus on.
Yeah.
And then at the end he tells him which eye it is, and then from that point on it's consistent, which is hilarious. Mm-hmm. That there's like an actual like subplot point about this. But I actually thought that was so well done. Which, by the way, can you actually do that kind of thing through special effects? Can you put in like a wandering eye through special effects?
That's fucking... No, it's definitely like a prosthetic or something. But I mean, it looks so real because he was fully acting with it. If you can de-age somebody, why wouldn't you be able to like... Yeah, but that seems like a huge job.
So overall, I loved the movie. I think it's a perfect movie, and the only reason I'm not giving it 5 stars is because it didn't blow my socks off. Yeah. You know what I mean? It was just a very enjoyable movie experience. And I don't know if that's an unfair bar to put. Like, I think I gave Parasite 5 stars, and I actually think that I like the Holdovers better than I like the Parasite. In Parasite, when it comes to hitting every element right, like really getting every element right. So it might be a 5-star for me. I didn't rate it on Letterboxd because I didn't want you to see what I thought of it before the podcast episode. But anyway.
All right. Well, then please anyway, after. I'm curious. But another thing I wanted to mention that I just thought was funny was like just the fact that they were so consistent with characters. Like the amount of times he had to bring up historical references was so funny. Like he had to mention the Romans.
He couldn't help himself.
Like he couldn't help himself, which I thought... I'm so glad they didn't get rid of that. Like consistently, he would always come back to it. And even if he was trying to say something like, emotional or real, like he would say like, well, like the Greeks, like it's like he would add it on. So I thought it was so funny.
Yeah, I think special mention. I mean, I think that all 3 main characters did an incredible job, but I think that Paul Giamatti was amazing. And I think that this is a really hard acting job because he's got so many unlikable qualities, and also he's so miserable. He's like such a miserable person. And there's many of the same notes that were in Sideways. Like in Sideways, he was a miserable person. So like just miserable. Like there's so many things that he's unhappy about. He's in Sideways. He's a failed actor. He's
Failed
divorced from
writer.
his wife, and he's hung up on failed writer. Yeah, failed writer. That's right, failed writer. And then the one thing that gives him joy is wine, like talking about wine. And because he's so, like, he's such a misanthrope in so many other ways. But yet, from the very beginning, there's something really noble about
Yeah.
him. Like, what I mean is noble is that he insists that they, he asks Mary to sit down with them immediately. He immediately, like, sort of treats her as an equal. You know what I mean? And so he's got so many good qualities. He's just such a miserable human being.
Yeah.
Like, he's not someone that I think, oh, I would want to hang out with.
When Tully asks about like women he's been with, he's like, "Well, I have details that'll make you curl your toes." Like, so funny. I was dying.
I know. He's such a great actor.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that wraps up our discussion of the movie. I really loved it. You liked it a lot. And now we're one day out from the Academy Awards getting announced. They got announced this morning, actually, right? They got announced early
The
this morning.
nominations got announced.
So, yes. So I don't know if you know this, but Paul Giamatti was not nominated for anything when Sideways came out. I think the guy who played his buddy, Thomas Hayden Church, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor. So this made it all the more outrageous. And people could not... And I think Virginia Madsen, who played his love interest in Sideways, was also nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and she won. I think she won. So nobody
What?
could believe that Paul Giamatti had been completely overlooked by the Academy
Wow.
at that time
Yeah.
with Sideways, which is shocking.
That is shocking. He was that movie, I think. I mean,
He was that
I think
movie.
I think I forgot the actor's name who played his friend. He was great, but that is
Thomas
such
Hayden Church.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that's like I don't know. It's like he's playing a bro. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't as complex. I feel
A
like
deluded bro.
yeah.
Yeah. So Paul Giamatti, I think that he just got nominated for Best Actor for the Academy Awards. He won the Golden Globe for Best Actor, but that's when they split the comedy and the drama categories, And then he also won Critics' Choice. So really what it comes down to, I really try hard not to root for particular people because the Academy is such bullshit, like in terms of what makes people vote the way that they want to vote. But I will say that I know for sure that in Best Actor, it's between him and Cillian Murphy. And I really, really want Paul Giamatti to win. I want him to win. Like, I don't know why I want him to win so badly, but I really want him to win. And so, because I think this was a great performance. I think that this is the type of performance where you say that guy is the best actor. And maybe I'm just biased. I must be biased, but I'm just not sure how I feel about Cillian Murphy's performance in Oppenheimer. Like, to me, Oppenheimer is about the movie. Like, it is a movie about big things, a big story, and it was stacked with major actors like Robert Downey Jr., Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Florence Pugh.
Yeah.
It's got so many, you know what I mean? So Oppenheimer is about it. Oppenheimer is like a massive sum of its parts.
Yeah.
It's got so many things going for it, and I don't think there's any question that it's going to get Best Picture. No question that it's going to win Best Picture. So I really want Paul Giamatti to win it because I think he's one of the three people who carried this movie, and but he's in a really tough category. And the other thing is Davine Joy Randolph, who played Mary, is up for Best Supporting Actress, and she's been sweeping it in all of the Best Supporting Actor. So I think that she's a sure thing, and I think she deserves it. I think she played that role with so much dignity and humor, and just like hinting at the grief that she felt. So if I'm rooting for anybody at this Oscars, and I'm not going to be able to watch because of the suspense, I'm definitely rooting for Paul Giamatti, and I'm definitely rooting for Davine Joy Randolph. I love their performances so much.
Yeah, I guess it depends whether you think it matters or what you think matters. It's like if they how they service like the movie as a whole, or how they service their characters, or how they just like how much that you think they contributed in terms of, I think you're right about
They are the movie.
Yeah, I think they are the movie. Yeah, and I think that's worth a bit more than Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer like was gonna be that movie. I feel like regardless of, I know a lot of Oppenheimer fans would disagree, because
Yeah.
I mean, they were amazing, obviously, but I'm not looking at that. Maybe just because I'm not that passionate about Oppenheimer, but I'm not looking at that movie and thinking like it wouldn't have been made without those actors. Like, I'm not looking at Robert Downey
Exactly.
Jr. like that at all, honestly.
Yes.
But something that's really amazing about, what was the actress who played Mary, what's her name again?
Davine Joy Randolph.
Davine Joy Randolph.
Davine.
Yeah, I had to search. I recognized her from the Hulu High Fidelity show, but
Oh.
I literally had to search it up because I could, like, such a wildly different character, like so different. And I loved High Fidelity, and she was such a core part of that show, which makes me upset why it was canceled. But like, I had to search it up because she was, I just couldn't believe that she had shifted to such a different character. And it was like during the movie too, because I had seen that she was in the cast. I was like, oh, that's the actress from High Fidelity. And I'm watching, I'm like,
Yeah.
there's no way. Can I search it up? So I think that shows her range. It's like really amazing. And I think actors who could do that should be praised. And yeah, that would be awesome if she won. So hopefully.
Yeah, I hope she wins. It was a really interesting. I mean, everybody is like sounding off about Greta Gerwig, which, as you know, I don't care. But Alexander Payne did not get nominated in the directing spot either. So he didn't get nominated for The Holdovers, which is interesting. I think The Holdovers is one of the Best Picture nominees, and then it got nominated in the screenplay category. So it got nominated, which I actually think it's worthy. I think it was a great screenplay. I think the writing was terrific. And then Davine and Paul Giamatti got nominated, but Dominic Sessa did not. So everyone's sort of bummed about that. But everyone's kind of expecting Robert Downey Jr. to take Best Supporting Actor. And so there's this sentiment which Sarah calls it's his time, or it's her time. So there's a sentiment in the Academy, where people get overlooked, or they feel like they haven't been recognized enough, or they've never gotten an award. So they win an award for a movie that is not even their best effort. This particularly happened to Al Pacino, who I think won an Oscar for Scent of a Woman, if I'm not mistaken, which was like Jamie Lee Curtis. Yes. So there's a whole bunch of actors who win it eventually for a movie that actually is not that important, but because it's more for their filmography. So really, really rooting for Paul Giamatti. Really, really love that film, and actually really interested in seeing Election because my friend Maureen says that it's one of her favorite movies ever. Oh, wow. Election, and it actually is a movie that made Reese Witherspoon. That was her breakout movie. That was her breakout role. So anyway, All right, that's it. So anything else you want to say about the Holdovers, or about the Oscars, or anything else about movies?
Yeah, I mean, I sympathize, I think, with people that think that directors or actors got snubbed. I think a fair amount of it has to do with, could the movie have been made without them? And I just like, I think I said this already, but Oppenheimer was Chris Nolan's movie, and I can't really see anything unique beyond that. Like, it's Chris Nolan's movie, and Chris Nolan's just going to do things the way Chris Nolan's going to do things. So whether or not he has like Cillian Murphy or Robert Downey Jr. to play those parts, it's like he's gonna make it the way it's just his. But how much do I care about a director making their vision come to life, or a collective of creatives coming together and making something together, even if it doesn't reach the heights of fucking bomb going off. But and maybe I'm salty because I always hear little side. I feel like everybody's influenced by other things too. Like, so I just literally saw a video about Chris Nolan doesn't like people going to the bathroom and stuff. on his
Yes, I
set,
saw
and
that.
like
Yeah.
comments about directors not being accommodating to people, and like how that affects their work ethic. So stuff like that will rub me the wrong way. Like so I guess vibes essentially is what we're going off of. But
I think we are.
yeah, but I care. I care about what what is most important in the filmmaking process, obviously, because I want to be in it. But I it's not something that everybody should like, or people should ostracize people for.
Yeah.
But whether
Agreed.
we'll see what happens, I guess.
But anyway, it's good to be back. It's good to be back on our podcast.
Yeah, that was a really
After our
great movie to
break.
come back to.
Oh yeah, it was. After Schindler's List, I felt like Schindler's List destroyed us.
Yeah, maybe we just
I
needed a
really
break from
felt
that.
like
Yeah,
I feel like, oh my God, that took like recovery. Again, I'm so glad that we watched it, but it really, really destroyed us. But the Holdovers was definitely, you know what's interesting? I was just about to say it was definitely a renewal of the spirit, but I don't know why, because there was so much unhappiness in it. Yet, again, I think that the Holdovers and the stories that Alexander Payne tells, I think that he lets you hang on to something. And
yeah.
I actually think that as people, we need to hang on to something,
If
especially in these times,
Yeah,
you know?
it just felt really nostalgic and familiar. I think the whole building, it builds character. Like
Yes.
being in a shitty situation with shitty people, but hoping that you still kind of come out of it with an experience. Yeah, everybody's had that sort of experience, and I was obviously thinking like, what if I was left back, at school, and I just had this to do. Of course, I have the privilege of having you guys to bank on all the time, so maybe that's why it's easier. But I loved going to summer camp. I loved going to whatever, no matter how shitty it was. And it wasn't shitty, but I'm just saying, like, if there were shitty things about it, like, it was still, it was just an experience I got to have. So, but
Yeah.
obviously that was a way different situation. But it just felt familiar, is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, I'm glad this was a great movie to start 2024. As it was great.
Of course, we're late.
I'm so happy that you put up. Yeah, no, but I'm so happy you put up our post with our new merch, and we should talk about whether or not we do more merch for people.
I mean,
whether we do like more versions or.
I mean, that's up to you. I'm not going to handle that. I just do this for fun, not to sell merch or whatever. Some people just wanted the merch. I'd be happy to just give them the logo so they could do it themselves. Like, but obviously that's not, that's not what they would want.
Let's end this and then I'll stop recording. But I just wanted to say a special shout out to Catherine, my friend, who wrote me an email and said, I don't know if you've seen the Holdovers or whatever, but I really felt that she goes, I don't know as much about movies as you and Eric, but this movie really, I really loved this movie.
I don't know
and it
shit.
really stayed with me.
But
so anyway,
shout
out to Catherine, who, yes, thank you for the suggestion. And maybe next time we'll do Poor Things if we can track it down somehow in either, if I can track it down in either a theater or on a streaming platform. So we
yeah, I'd watch it again too.
All right.
It was actually pretty great.
All right. I love you very much.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.